A lot of abuse, mental, emotional, physical. And when I was about 14 or 15, I met my son's father. And when I was about 16, I moved in with him and we started selling drugs. And we did a lot of partying. And at about 18, 19, I started college because I really wanted to do good things, but I just never knew how. So like the whole time I was just selling drugs, and I started to go into criminal justice. So then I started to play that side of it, and I ended up just like setting up people so that I could make more money if they got in the way. And so for about the next
Yeah, you got parameters, boundaries.
So for the next how many years, that's all I did was drink, use drugs, get into fights. But there was a lot of violence. I was just involved with a lot of unhealthy relationships. I mean, just like your average, you know what I mean, reservation life. And so when I was about 22, 23, that's when things started to get a little bit more out of control. I ended up getting a connection where I had an endless amount of supply of drugs. And so things really turned up at that point. I ended up trying to fill this hole in my life. Like I knew that I needed something, but I just didn't know what I needed. So I thought at first that it was like the drugs. So we ended up getting a lot of drugs. It wasn't the drugs. Then I thought it was money. And so we ended up getting it, you know, more money. And then I thought it was like the house and the kids, and we got that, and it wasn't that either. And so I ended up like just extremely depressed. I mean, like extremely depressed. I was hateful. I hated everyone. I was always fighting. It was just like a miserable, I made it everybody else around me miserable too. So at about 24, I think, that's when things just got like extremely crazy. And you know, the Lord knew, because he would put it in my spirit. I didn't know anything about the Lord. I didn't know God. I didn't know any prayer. I knew the prayer, like Our Father prayer, because my mom had taught me that because she was Catholic when she was little. And so all I knew was that there was a God, but I just didn't know what God was or anything like that. But at that time in my life, I started to pray to the Lord, who I didn't even know, and I just asked him to save me, if he would save me and my family. Because towards the end of it, like when things were getting extremely rough and I was just doing like an immense amount of drugs. I mean, I was doing 20, 30 Oxy 30s a day at this point, and I was just to maintain. And so I started to pray, and I could always, every night I could feel like this heavy demonic like force around me. I started to really get into like, you know, just witchcraft at the time. And I didn't know though, because I thought it was all good. I thought, you know, this fortune teller that I had become really good friends with, I thought she was good. You know, I thought my little manifestations and my little potions and my little candle lightings and all this, I thought they were good things. So, but anyways, it kept getting worse and worse. Like the more things that I was getting into, the more, I mean, I ended up, and you know, the enemy really knows how to work too, because I did get more of everything. I got more money, I got more drugs, I got the house that I wanted, you know what I mean? But I was miserable. I was dead inside and I was miserable. And so anyways, that's about the time that I started to pray at night, because I could just feel that heavy demonic, like it was terrifying. Every night I would go to sleep and I would be terrified. But I would sing to my child, my son at that time, he was a newborn. I would sing like the Lord's song to him. And I never even, I mean, that was the Lord calling me in before I ever knew. And so about a couple of months, not even maybe 2 months after that time of my life, we ended up getting raided by the feds. And they had I think maybe 6 months they had like surveillance dust. And during that time, after they kicked in our doors, they didn't find anything. I literally thought that I was the smartest person ever. I thought that I was gonna sell drugs forever and that I was just gonna have all kinds of money and everything forever. But what happened was like I ended up like, we used to hide our drugs and money in the trails. So when they busted in and kicked our doors and they didn't find anything, like we had actually swallowed a bunch of drugs, but like we used to band them up. And actually they were there for like 4 hours. The feds were there for like 4 hours. And when they left, like we puked it back up. Oh my goodness. It was really crazy. I mean, crazy stuff that we used to do, right? But anyways, I always knew that I would get caught somewhat, but since I had never been in any real trouble before, I thought that maybe, I'll get like 6 months, a year, or whatever. And so after they came that day, I knew that I was going to be indicted, because now I knew, like, the feds, I never thought anything about the feds were coming, but after they had came, I thought surely they're going to indict us. They don't kick in your door unless, you know what I mean, they have some proof on you. So after that happened, things really spiraled out of control. I started doing all the drugs. Well, I was already doing it before then, but I started doing like even more drugs. We spent all the money. I ended up leaving town. And my boys' dad at that time, he got indicted before me because he got into a really bad fight, and the guy got life flighted out. So while he was in jail, they indicted him. And when he was in jail, he had called home and he told me, hey, I just got indicted, so watch out. And I left everything. I left the house, I left my kids, I gave my kids to my mom, and I ended up just leaving everything. I took all the money and I spent everything, and I went on this like couple month like terror to like kill myself. And it was really crazy because at this point I was done like with everything. I was already done months before that, when I was literally drowning in drugs and alcohol, like the most that I ever could. I was really trying to drown myself now, like just with everything. I started shooting up, and then I started shooting up heroin right away too, before right after I left the reservation. And it went on for like a couple of months. I knew that the feds were eventually going to catch up with me, and I knew that we were looking at a lot of time. And so while I was out on like my little trying to kill myself mission, because that's exactly what it was. Like, I couldn't understand why I wasn't dying. Like, I kept trying to kill myself. I would do all these pills, and then I would shoot up heroin, and I'd be drinking like straight out of the bottle, and I could not die, and I didn't understand why. And so I ended up getting arrested in Milwaukee. The same Fed that had indicted me 4 hours north came all the way to Milwaukee to get me, and he found me. And when he did, I thought about, like, I remember running upstairs to like grab all of the pills, and I was gonna take them. I was just gonna eat them all, but I grabbed them, and then I stopped, and like I was like running up the stairs, and it was a couple of story stair house. So like on my way up, I seen the feds in the back, and then I seen them in the front. And anyways, I went upstairs and I grabbed those drugs, and then I just let them down. And I ended up just walking down the stairs and opening the door, and I still, at this point, it didn't really hit me. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just get booked in and released, like maybe they'll just like let me go. Well, anyways, after I had gotten in the car, this is like when I figure out like how bad it is. This is when I was like, okay, like this is serious. And he started telling me like the charges, and I was like, so like, am I going home? Like, am I going to come back for a court date? And he was like, you're not going home. And so I ended up like, I just remember like crying hysterically, because even though I was like this supposedly like bad person, I was really like extremely sensitive. That's why I was always fighting. That's why I was always really mean to everybody, because I was just extremely broken and sensitive. And all I really wanted was like love that I kept trying to grasp for money and drugs and everything, and I couldn't get it. So I ended up for the next like week spending in jail, and they actually let me out because I had never been in any trouble before this, besides like you're overnight drunken, you're in jail till Monday and then you get out or whatever, but no major things. So when I sat there for about a week, and this is also like just the way that the Lord strategically places things. I was in there, and the whole week that I was in there, I was miserable. And I didn't really know, like when you first get locked up, I didn't know really what kind of time yet that I was looking at. It was a federal case, so I didn't really know like what the point system, and I didn't really know what anything meant. And I'm waiting to get the information, and I remember that they had this church service going on, and they had food. And I just wanted the food, really. I was like, well, I'll go to get some snacks or whatever. And so I went there to get some snacks, and I was so arrogant and mean. And I remember sitting around this table, and they had, all these women were sitting around this table, and they all had the Bible. And I sat there and I mocked them, because I was like, are you guys like, you guys are living your life. And I mean, I'm serious, just like this, just extremely rude and arrogant. And I sat there and made fun of them because they were living their life off of a book. And I remember like asking them, if they had heard of the game Telephone, like when it passed down. So I just really, I couldn't grasp reality, but like what I didn't know was the Lord was literally drawing me in, even though when I was like the most undeserving. And so a couple of days later, I'd found out, you know what I mean, that they were going to actually let me go on pretrial, like to get things squared away with my kids or whatever, to find out, you know, at the end of my trial, like how much ever time, get things squared away before I went to prison. So they ended up letting me out in the care of my sisters, though. So I ended up having the ankle monitor on and everything. And I ended up going to my sisters, and as soon as I got out, I did the same thing, except like I was just really trying, and now I was really trying to kill myself, because I was just like, I don't want to go to prison for, you know, years. I'd never even sat in jail before more than, you know, that 1 week that I was waiting to get out. Like, so anyways, I ended up in a lot of trouble that first week. I skipped my appointment. I ended up just, I failed my drug test, and I just started partying, like I said, just shooting up and everything before, and I had planned to, I had really planned to die, like before I went in, and I didn't really want to die. I just wanted the pain to go away, and I didn't know how. And so I remember sitting on my sister's floor one night, and like I had almost killed her the day before that, because I had gave her some fentanyl, and since I was taking so much drugs at that time, and they weren't doing that to me because I was so immune to it, I ended up giving her some, and she ended up in the hospital overdosed, and she was in there for a couple of days, and it was just, anyways, I almost killed her. After that, the day after that, I remember being on her floor and just like kneeling down and being like, please, like, save me, help me, like, save me. I didn't know really what or who I was praying to, but anyways, so and then just right after a couple of days after I did that, I was like driving in a car, and the person that I was driving with was blacked out. They were doing 150 down the highway of Green Bay, and I just remember, like, when you think about it with like your logical mind, there's no way you can be doing 150 down the highway and going off of the road and like going back on it, because that's how they were passing cars. They were going off of the highway, like onto the grass, and they were going like around that. And like the Lord had reminded me after I had met the Lord that there were angels there. Like he had this plan the whole time, because I was sitting there screaming in the car, you know, we're flying down the road. We literally get pulled over maybe a few miles down, and he ended up getting clocked at this point at only like 90 or 100. But they let me go. I was on a federal case, and I still don't know how to this day they let me go. But they ended up letting us go, and he was blacked out driving, and he, you know, really couldn't even like function. It was like beyond me. Well, anyways, after the day after that, because I was on the monitor and it clocked my speed going 150. So I remember the next day I was sitting we were all drinking, we were all doing drugs up in my sister's apartment, and I remember looking out the window, and I seen the truck started to pull up, and I was just like, I ran downstairs in the basement, and there was 2 buildings that connected to one, and I remember thinking like, I'm just gonna run, I'm gonna cut it off, and like I stopped, and I was just like, oh, I was like literally to the end of myself, and I didn't end up cutting it off or whatever. They ended up setting off the alarm, and it started beeping, and so I ended up getting locked up. And I remember when they picked me up, just like the disgrace of everything, you know, of like being on the news and everything, and the way that they had made me sound. In my mind, I was like this innocent girl. I really was. I was like, I have a drug problem, and they make me look like this monster. And I was just extremely humiliated. I was extremely broken because of my kids, and just the humiliation that I had put my family through. And so they were booking me into one of the counties over there. And I remember thinking like, please God, this is another one of those when you just pray to God when you're at your like wit's end. And I remember praying like, please God, please don't let me get sick. I mean, because I was doing heroin, pills, drinking, you know, alcohol. I mean, this was all day, every day. That's just what we were doing. And so I remember thinking like, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital. These guys are gonna have to take me to the hospital. And so I ended up praying, and I was like, please God, don't let me get sick. And I waited, and like the first day came, and the second day came, and like I just kept like waiting for it to happen. It didn't happen, and I was just like, it was bizarre. Like that's not heard of at all. I was thinking they were gonna have to take me to the hospital and whatever, but it never happened. And so throughout like maybe the next week or two, like I was getting transferred, maybe 3 weeks or whatever the time was, I ended up getting transferred over to Dane County. When I got to Dane County, it was the same thing, you know, was able to get out just for the Bible studies or whatever. And, you know, honestly, I don't remember learning anything in the Bible studies. I don't remember, I just knew, like, it was just that little piece of hope. You know, no one ever laid hands on me and prayed for me. They never asked if, you know, I wanted to accept Jesus or whatever. But at this point, when they had locked me back up, I knew that I was looking at years and years and years in prison. They ended up I ended up finding out that they had had everybody tell on us that we're selling drugs for us. So what they did was they added up everything from this person, and just threw all the numbers together and said that what it was for 6 months. And so it was like thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And I was thinking, like, I'm going to be in prison for life. And so about this time too is like when I was literally this was probably like my breaking point when I found out like actually how much time I was going to have to serve. And I was thinking, like, I can't do this. And I remember I was so full of hate and anger. Like, I hated everybody and I wanted to hurt everybody. Like, I just was like at the most destruction I was. And there was this girl there that night that I was gonna fight with, and I remember like being so broken and like wanting to hurt her so bad, but I was like, I have this case against me, and I was afraid to get in any more trouble. And I remember I went in my cell and like I just broke down. Like, I was just crying like uncontrollably, like on my knees, and I was just crying. And the next day I woke up, and like people probably thought that I was like, really, I was crazy. I had cried out to God that night, and I woke up the next day, and it was like a radical transformation of my heart.
Wow.
It wasn't like a little, like, I just, you know, oh, well, maybe he is real. He touched my heart in such a way, like literally freed me. I didn't even know that I was in bondage before. I knew I was super depressed and wanted to die, but I didn't even know the state of which I was actually in hell on earth until he freed me from it in that next day. And I just became like super. I remember being on the phone with everyone and being like, I found Jesus.
Wow.
I found the Lord. And they were thinking I was crazy, because I was, at this point, I was still going to prison for years upon years. Like, but I was telling everyone, like, I was like, I'd never been so free, even though I was on my way to prison.
Wow.
And like the minute that I fell in love with the Lord, he started to do these like miracles. All of a sudden they're coming in and they're like, well, you're a drug addict, and you know, we're going to knock off 30 pills a day for you and for your husband for 6 months, you
Wow.
know. And even after they knocked off all those pills, we still had like 15 years hanging over our head. And I was like, at this point I was thinking, you know, I remember my lawyer telling me, he was like, you just have to be okay with doing 10 years. And I, like, it never even crossed my mind, like, because the Lord had put that assurance in me. So I was just like, no, like, I'm not doing it. And he was like, well, on a good day, he was like, you'll get 12 years. And then on a bad day, you'll get 15, because he has to stay. He was telling me that the judge had to stay inside of the federal guideline range. So, which, like I said, I was just learning about. And so, for the next, you know, month or two while I waited to get sentenced, I fell in love with the Lord. I started to read the word, and just like everything that I was reading just started to come to life to me. And I didn't know about anything, but I remembered Esther in the Bible. I was reading about Esther, and I know that she fasted when she, you know, she wanted something. So here I am getting ready to get sentenced, and I thought like 3 days before I got sentenced, I was like, I'm gonna fast, you know.
Wow.
And then like my fasting was like, I was literally eating candy, like candies and drinking stuff, but like I was just, my heart was so pure before the Lord. And I was like, Lord, I'm gonna do this for you. If you just, and I remember telling him, like, can you give me 5 years? I was like, and I was just honest with the Lord. I was like, if you give me 10 or 15 years, like, I will become worse at becoming bad. Like, and so anyways, at this point, I fasted for the 3 days, and I remember we go into the courtroom, and they sit us down in there, and I didn't see the second part of it, but I was only in the first part of it, and they say things in months. So he said 60 months, and I was like sitting there like trying to count, and I was thinking, and my lawyer looked over me and said, you know, that it was 5 years. And I was just like lit up. I was so excited. And so the marshals were taking me out and they were like, this must be your lucky day. We've never seen anybody ever get anybody with a lead-in conspiracy enhancement get over 5 years under the federal guideline range.
Praise
And
God.
I was like ecstatic. I went back to the cell, or I went back to the block, and I was like telling everybody about like what Jesus had did for me. And so for the next couple of months, like I just went down this like amazing like process with the Lord. Like before that, I guess I never really thought that I did anything wrong, but at that point, like the Lord had really been revealing to me, you know, like all like just the poison that I had put my community in and all the hurt that I had caused people, like really brought me to repentance. And I fell in love with the Lord for the next couple of years. And then I mean, like we were like extremely close. Like I just don't mean like a little. Like I mean, I lived, breathed, like thought about the Lord all day long.
Oh.
I remember like one point I was so like in love with the Lord that when I would get up in the morning, I would never set my alarm because I didn't want to offend him. So like I would just always like not use my alarm, and he never did. I was never late. I was never late for work going to prison. Like, and so even out of that 5 years, I didn't sit the whole 5 because I ended up getting into a program where I got like so much. I ended up only sitting 2.5 years. I got time knocked off for this like intense like in treatment program that they had in the prison, and then after that I got another 6 months off for the halfway house time. So I only sat, you know, what was like what, you know, over 15 years, or 12 to 15 after they gave me the reduction. I sat like 2.5 years.
Woo!
So, anyway,
Praise God.
that's what I have like, and the Lord's done so many, like I have so many testimonies, but that was life changing for me. That was the most that's the biggest thing that the Lord's ever done, was save my life. Yeah.
Amen.
Awesome.
Amen.
Woo!
Amen. Oh, that word, Sonia, you're talking about?